Welcome to the latest episode of Enterprise Minds. We got the whole crew here, which is fantastic. And today we're going to talk AI in enterprises. Alex, you had the most solid idea when we were generating topics for today. So why don't you take us?
Sure. Yeah, it was just a kind of problem that I was realizing that we're coming up against, which was initial AI HR policies typically at a company was don't feed it personal data, don't feed it any company data. Sure, you can use it for making, an Excel formula or helping you to write an email, but, try not to name names and definitely don't use any kind of, real world data in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as things have kind of progressed, we've learned more and more about AI tools and making them more useful. It's basically sharing tons of data with them. And if you give them lots and lots of context, then they are far better at being able to pull together solutions, answer questions, all the rest when it's, business related. So it becomes this problem between the two of them of do you feed it or do you not? So to feed or not to feed? That is the question. So what have you seen? Kind of what are the limits that you think should be there? Any solutions that you found? I've actually just seen some few that might help, but I'm interested in seeing kind of what everybody's experiences are too.
I think for me, at least within enterprises, you have that kind of push pull of, hey, we bought a tool, you should use it. And then there's no training, there's no onboarding, or
Yeah.
if it is, they create a SharePoint and just say all the things you need to know is there. And you go, okay, but that's not effective. Or I had a training recently where it was like 6 hours out of my week. And it was so detailed on how to submit certain types of tickets that 15 minutes in, I just went, I'm not going to remember any of this until I actually do it. And I don't know that this applies to me. And I have 5.75 hours to go. So, there's a whole lot of problems in terms of rolling things out and communicating things well, as well as, like, to your point, what is allowed and the gray area that's created through, do we have something off the shelf that then consumes everything, like a chat GPT for enterprise, or Google Gemini, Claude, whatever? Or do we build a bespoke system
Yeah.
leveraging these things but isolated to the company data so that you can use company data? And honestly, I think you're going to have a mix of both, whether official or unofficial. And the real question isn't necessarily to feed or not to feed, but what to do when things do get fed, right? Because you're not going to be able to control everybody.
No, no, you really can't.
I come at it from a slightly different angle, which is when I hear you talking about AI HR policies and don't feed it personal data, don't feed it company data, feed it company data. This to me is a pretty stark line of just like you don't do that. Like getting an Excel formula, the sort of generic requests, that's one thing. And I go, yeah, ChatGPT is really good at that. Like it can do a lot of things. Um, but when it comes to sort of company data, et cetera, um, and working in, I work in the healthcare space, so it's much more conservative to say, hey, that's just we're just not going there because we don't want to open the gates until we've sort of got the company policies and such in place. That said, I think your comment about, hey, having the context present and therefore the data is going to help you have better decisions. And so I imagine other companies are doing something similar to what I experienced, which is we do have an in-house tool. Both, there's a series of, hey, maybe in-house proprietary closed loop systems, isolated, Dave, that you mentioned, but also Copilot, right? I think this is one of the things that Microsoft did early on was to say, hey, we're going to offer an enterprise solution that solves for some of the known enterprise issues within Copilot. is it as effective and awesome to use as Claude, as ChatGPT? You know, no, not at all. It can be incredibly frustrating at times, especially if you're used to working with the sort of more out of the box, continuously updated tools out there. But one of the things that I noticed yesterday, I was listening to ChatGPT's announcement for business. They made a number of things, and essentially what they announced is, hey, ChatGPT now does the things that Copilot does, which is it can access your data, it can record and transcribe everything you do. I wouldn't be surprised if it does a better job in terms of providing better, more contextual answers and information than Copilot does. But that suite of tool is so valuable. The idea that I could say, hey, Copilot, please summarize yesterday's emails because I was out of office, get that, find out quickly who I need to respond to, or hey, I've got this meeting coming up, help me prepare. What are the documents I should be looking at? This stuff is invaluable. So I think there is a huge benefit to providing the context and the data needed to be able to have those advantages. And part of that is just having the enterprise solutions to be able to enable that.
Because when you refocused on HR, right? Of course, my brain goes 1,000 different ways. You know, there's some applicable laws that you have to go and follow, right, around personal identifiable data and whatnot. I guess for me, where my brain went in particular was, especially with the Google I/O conference, they showed this a little bit last year, but then this year especially they showed it with the Google Glass relaunch and that real-time AI and the voice, to me, is where I get more concerned, because if you have your work computer, and if anybody's listening, I've definitely not done this, but I have thought of this as an issue to discuss on this podcast. If you are sitting on one of these like huge Power BI dashboard with a ton of data and you're reading through it and you want certain questions answered, but there's no way for you to copy that over into your proprietary system or whatever else, it is very easy for me to imagine somebody pulling out their personal phone and pulling up Gemini live, showing, the screen from the camera and then asking questions about it. And then just typing in whatever they need. And it's like that kind of use case is something that, in terms of HR policy, I could see that easily being a fireable offense because of the proprietary data piece.
A few of the things I think about when you ask that question about providing data and giving it context, because I am so used to having the enterprise tools available and just having to work within there, those sorts of questions I haven't thought about in the business context as much, simply because it's sort of it's a non-issue to an extent. Like I don't have a choice in the matter, or at least I'm choosing to follow all of the guidelines and the sort of rules and regulations, which I think is an important thing. But what I do think about is in my personal use of the various tools, there's a squeamish factor. I'm not sure. Like I don't know how much information I am comfortable or I'm ready to relinquish to various companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt this way around Google and sort of how much information I'm providing. And I still get a little squeamish about some of the photo applications that are like, oh yeah, we can track your face across the things, and then you can search for your face and you can find all the pictures that have you in it. Like even with the sort of rudimentary versions of this, I found myself hesitating. And so as of late, I've leaned more towards, you know what? I don't need to give every last bit of detail about the situation I'm encountering in order to get a good enough result, because I just don't know enough about the space yet to know whether or not I want the various tools to know, who my family members are, how old they are, what their preferences are, let alone my own preferences. And of course, a lot of that comes out with the types of questions I ask. So now ChatGPT knows what I had for lunch yesterday because it gave me recipes on, or the amount of baking time I needed for a particular set of potatoes and some garlic toast. And so there's that superficial level. But I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are about that layer deeper of where that line is for you, about how much information you're willing to provide these different tools in order to get the better results.
Alex, you've been awfully quiet thus far, so that's you first.
No, I'll throw in. Actually, we had a fun icebreaker at work, and it was ask ChatGPT or whatever AI tool as you prefer to create a trilogy poster about you, and along with plot summaries. And if you use like a kind of snarky one, like I prefer to use, which was like ChatGPT's Monday, which is very snarky. It gives you something of like, I came, I tried, I went back to bed, or something like that. It's like it was pretty funny actually because everyone who did it, there was enough data, and they all got basically the same result. I switched over to using the standard models that I use, and I asked it, saying, of all the memory that you have on me across all the different conversations, create this. And it was kind of fascinating because it gives you this like, summarized glimpse into what it understands from you. And you can always go to like ChatGPT's memory and you can read the entire kind of basic transcript of what it knows about you and all these different elements, things that you've asked it to remember and things that it's picked up on. But what I got was basically is I ask a lot of really technical questions. I played a bunch of like random AI games with it, and I've asked some random like trivia kind of stuff. So it basically gave me like, 3 snapshots. Does that represent me at all? Not really. That's not really targetable psychographic information. It's not so much about any kind of those specifics. I also have the fortunate opportunity of working with a company that's not as tightly regulated as my prior employers. So we're allowed to do much more, but there still is those hesitation, I guess, where my line is to your question. Definitely not sales data. I know it could be way better at some analysis, and I've given it random figures before, and it's pulled out things that I didn't recognize. Like just a curiosity, I put in a bunch of like random number chart and I made a chart out of it saying like analyze this, like tell me product ABC, what's the sales volume or something like that, right? And it's all made up in Excel data. Um, but it pulled apart things that I, at first glance at least, definitely did not recognize. So there's value in it, but I'm preventing myself from having that value because of that line too. So I kind of always struggle with that line of, how far do you go with that? Um, Allowing it to know public information. Again, being fortunate that I'm on the marketing side of things, most information that I have is public information. So that's website, online PDFs, you name it. So extracting data from those, creating images based upon our brand standards, based upon our website. It can do all those different elements. It can summarize, our tone and voice based upon our text, and that's all public information as well. In a way, I am requesting it train itself and create these things, though, so you're still compiling things that didn't exist before. So in some way, you are still sharing data that it didn't know before, too. So that's always kind of the back and forth of it, too, of like the output is now a created piece of content that it now knows. Privacy wise, of course, I always turn everything off. I'm just kind of that kind of individual in general. So I do try to keep it private. What about you guys? What's the limit?
Bit tricky for me to extrapolate further simply because we are just using the internal tools. They are sort of closed system. I think you bring up a really good point, which is where you're not using an internal system, where you're using something like a ChatGPT, a Claude, even if you're working with public information, say you're working on something that's available through a website, PDFs that are publicly accessible, the questions that you're asking to some degree could relate back to company strategy. Because you're asking those questions, and you're saying, this is what we're trying to accomplish, this is what we're trying to do. And that's where the gray area becomes very interesting, because we don't yet know what the negative outcomes of that could be. And what I mean by that is, if it was sort of a random person listening into the questions you were asking in a vacuum, they might not be able to glean that much. Like, oh, cool, they're improving their website, they're trying to optimize, or this part is of the website is not very good. They're looking into how they can fix that part of the website. Like in theory, you could find that out by just looking at their website, but you might not know this is the exact thing they're looking at. Okay, now we're working with systems that have a lot of information, and there's a bit of smartness thrown on top. What are the sort of second and third run effects of having that sort of compiled together? And that's where my mind goes when I hear you talk, Alex, is I go, we don't know what the unintended consequences are, or what the novel what the novel uses of these tools could be, because this type of information gathering and ability to access data hasn't existed in this format before.
So for me, it's interesting, at least with marketing use cases with proprietary data. I think, Alex, what you said about the publicly available data, I'm going to go ahead and use that as much as I possibly can, because then I don't need the legal approvals, then I don't need the checks, because it's already out there, right? It's already been done. The use case I've been hearing the most about recently has been with mid-year performance reviews. And
sorry, that you just imagining how bad that can get.
So let's play that one out, because that's going to be relatable to everybody. Right. So how do most people keep track of it? They don't. For the people who do keep track of what they've done for throughout the year, you have a Word document, you have an Excel sheet, you have something, right? So then when the company comes back at you and says, all right, put together a one slide, put together, this in whatever HR human capital system they've subscribed to, then you can, go into that. And I know certain HR platforms are now using AI to extract data from what you've put into the system to decide whether or not you're going to be ready for a promotion, or you're in burnout danger, or you're in, all these other effects that come in. Are you necessarily worried about proprietary data at that point? I don't know if it's internal communications. Like, that's where I'm going to lean on the expertise of the lawyers and the people who are vetting the stuff. But yeah, I mean, just some people just sitting down with the AI and saying, okay, here's my gut feeling on what I've done this year. Here are my frustrations, and what I think I'm good at, and clean this up so I can put it to my boss for the midterm review, so that I can just keep doing the to-do list.
It's just depressing on so many levels. If that is what your mid-year review is, then your boss is not doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care, and I've told them this, I don't care if people I work with or who work on my team are using AI to help them formulate their review slides, or here's the recap of it, because I don't want them spending time wordsmithing. Like, when I have to do those things historically, I've spent so much time agonizing about every single word. It's like building a resume. That's not a
Mhm.
good use of anybody's time. The whole point of reviews and things like mid-year reviews is it opens up conversations. It says, how
Right.
are we doing? Are we meeting the things we talked about last time? It's not just paper crunching, or if it is, then something has gone significantly wrong within the sort of HR
Mhm.
approach.
But how do they show usage on the new tool that they bought that has AI features
Oh,
for, human capital management
let's
if you don't have these very specific things uploaded?
just kills me, Dave. Kills me. When metrics become a target, they seem to be cease to be useful as a metric.
1000%. But how else are shareholders going to love you if you're not saying you're the most efficient thing possible?
I think this gets at to this. So we're talking about AI in enterprise, and this I think gets at a really important sort of mindset that we need to take on or we need to adopt, and we need to think about our mindset as it relates to AI. If it's just allowing us to do more of the number crunching that looks good on paper and allows us to do these sort of large scale reports that may or may not be. I don't think we're sort of really reaping the value of
Mhm.
and potential that exists within this new suite of capabilities and tools that we have. When I thought about mid-year reviews, when you brought that up, I was like, oh, I've got a fantastic use case for this. Because one of the things that we want to do is we want to seek feedback from other people about how we're doing. Well,
Mhm.
I I'm not a survey expert. I don't know the right way to ask questions. You could give me like 2 days and maybe I could figure it out. So one of the first use cases I had was to say, hey, you know what? You are a questionnaire design expert. This is what you're trying to do. Come up with a series of questions. Okay, now you're a different questionnaire design expert. What would you do? Now you're a different questionnaire design expert. What would you do? To create a series of questions, I go, oh, this is going to help me better understand how I'm doing, how those around me are doing, and create better room for conversations. And that's I think the piece that's so important is AI can create content from now until forever, and no one is going to read it, or it's not going to be useful unless we add the value to it. I'll stop there because I've been on a bit of a rant, and I can see Alex has some things
Oh,
to
I'm
say as
just
well.
struggling. So I value 360 reviews highly.
Mhm.
We are basically asking to explain those quickly. You basically are sending a quick survey to colleagues of an individual, either someone who reports to you or yourself, to maybe five, six people. They fill out the different fields, they send it back to you, and you basically get a nice kind of transparent critique of how they see you doing in these different areas and where you can grow. I think it's really helpful because you can craft those questions. And I spend a lot of time, and I even have some like templates that I like to use because I don't like standard ones and stuff like that, trying to get down to something that's very actionable instead of just like, how did this person, apply themselves for this random, one of our mission statement pillars or something. It's like some random phrase. And it's like, okay, no, 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 no. Let's actually make this real, like make some value
Mhm.
out of this. And then I had a coworker confessed to me that they used ChatGPT to fill out all the 360 reviews requests that they ever got because there's too many of them. And it killed me because it was like you value it so much and they don't. So they're putting in not much effort into this. And honestly, this being 360s and AI and all the rest of that could be swapped out for so many other things too. It is a question of doing the important thing, communicating that it is the important thing, and having people agree that it is the important thing and working on it like it is the important thing. Like it's creating that focus, creating that priority on it, and then having that shared desire and focus to see it through.
Mhm.
And if you have just more and more and more reports, more pages, longer slides, more charts, that's not helpful. The analysis is what's helpful. The recommendations are what's helpful. Underlying data and all the rest is just the proof points, and then you move on from that. And I think that's the difficulty here is what we're seeing is it is really easy to create the fluff or the proof points underneath but it's still difficult to summarize it down to being the actionable things, the important pieces, and to
Yeah.
communicate that. That's a team thing too.
And this is interesting for me because in the back of my head, I've been thinking about, we've had two generations of people who have had, Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, like real-time data on social media platforms, like just overwhelmed with data all the time, right? And I think there are a number of instances where I've been looking at the situation and I'm like, oh, because there's no data, or because the data doesn't tell the story that you want it to, you're afraid to make a decision. Right? You don't know how to make a decision without having 17 bullet points of, here's the thing that proves that, this is a safe play. Right? And that's the thing that is interesting to me with, again, some of these 360 reviews or survey questions, is like, yeah, AI does the thing well, but if it's not prioritized, or if you're not actually dealing with the human beings correctly, it will still absolutely fail. Because if you have that 360 meeting, but then the manager shows up to the review and just goes, look, things have been on fire, are you going to quit? You're just a crap manager. Let's start there. Like, because no system, no AI is going to fix that EQ problem, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I'm
step
just
down before I get ranty.
so fascinated to watch what the different cultural norms will evolve around mitigating this problem that you just described, Dave. I don't even know what the name for that is. As well as
Anxiety, I think.
the
Time
AI fluff,
management.
right? Like here's a 40-page deck that just spews information at
Yeah.
you. It says,
Mhm.
oh, just do the thing I said. Here's 40 pages that say why you should do this. And it forces the recipient to do the analysis. So I've seen this come up a lot more in the last actually a few weeks, but even just a couple of months, of just the spew of content as though it was sort of a stand-in for an analysis or a recommendation. It's just like, here's a
Mhm.
whole bunch of here's just a whole bunch of things. Here's the 17 bullet points, whether or not they're good 17 bullet points, we don't know. And just like with text messaging and emojis, with social media and who you share and how you share, there's norms that we evolve, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. Sometimes the younger generations sort of evolve them a little bit more quickly. We're so early that a lot of those norms haven't quite come into play yet. And so that's one thing I'll be watching.
Mhm.
I think one of the key things I keep coming back to is that AI isn't good for creative recommendations, creating those like, here's 5 different disparate pieces of data. I'm going to pull this together and summarize it. Some of the deep research ones are okay at it, but that's
Mhm.
it. They're okay at it. Really, content generation for, a Gen AI system is what it's built on and built for. And it's great at being really verbose, just word after word after word, and you're creating a bunch of stuff on not much. But
Mhm.
coming up with the creative solution, the prioritization, the internal like emphasis and Dave, to your point, the EQ,
Mhm.
those are all gaps. So it is not some, wonderful tool for absolutely everything. There are just so many gaps all over it. And I think you said it really well, not treating people as people. That is a massive problem. The more
Yep.
that we do that, the more that we fail. The more that we don't do that, treating people as people.
One thread I want to pick out of that is it it does these tools do create a ton of words. And what's your comment about how they don't create things, they don't generate, they don't prioritize, etc. On the surface, they do. And that's what's so interesting to me is you don't, unless you know the subject matter well, it's hard to spot the issues, or it's hard to spot the faults, which is yet another area where we're gonna have to figure how you work around that. Maybe it gets so good so quickly that just goes away. But we still are back to that piece, which is you have to recognize either when it's hallucinating or when it just didn't do a very good job. Like it may be like true, it's just not very good. And perhaps some of the value we get out of these is sort of providing us different lenses and ways of thinking, rather than doing the thinking for us.
On that note, however, I think there is a propensity for human beings to just take what the computer says as fact and roll with it. So that's something that I'm on the lookout for, like use cases for that, because I know I've seen it. I've heard arguments where people are pushing back on people with very high expertise saying, no, you're wrong. Here's what Copilot told me. It's like, whoa, wait, do you realize what you just implied? That the entire team of specialists the company has employed doesn't know the ins and outs and the nuances of your particular situation to the extent where Copilot, the worst of all AIs, will tell you the reality. Like, no. Speaking of HR, we should be able to flag people like that. Like, this person's an idiot. Please review them.
So this came up earlier and I wanted to comment, and I just want to throw in this kind of side note right now. Google Gemini, not fantastic. Good at some things, struggles with a lot. Microsoft Copilot struggles a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Two, industry incumbents, massive, industry giants who are absolutely failing because of smaller companies that are more nimble and quick or able to move faster. I mean, OpenAI has stated that they still have annual goals. They still have annual, um, basically, setups. They still do quarterly goals. They still do all the same kind of corporate elements that any other corporation has.
Mm-hmm.
But they are moving so much faster and so much better than these two massive companies who have all the people and all the history and all the money, and they can't do it. Just kind of an interesting behemoth versus
Hang on.
So
startup-esque with their billions still. OpenAI with their
I would challenge that a little bit because, okay, ChatGPT was the first to market, so they get a kind of a pass for being first, and people are more familiar with them, right? I mean, there are obvious advantages to being first to market. They have specifically stayed with text and memory around text. And do they have these other things? Yeah, but for the most part, all of the other features that they have, like, voice mode and whatever else, are text related. If you look at what Google has been doing, the Deep Research Lab is doing a lot of vertical things, right? The AlphaFold that won the Nobel Prize for protein folding. Mm-hmm. That is a very specific use case that has massive potential for things. They've also spun out an entire AI thing for drug development. Again, not necessarily consumer, massive potential in the business side of things. The VO release that they just did on videos and stuff, and being able to have that continuity between scenes, again, is really cool. That's the most consumery thing that they've had, but it's spread out. I feel like if Google had a focus to the extent that ChatGPT has, it would be better. My frustration with Gemini and the way that I use it compared to ChatGPT is that it struggles with memory. It will tell me, oh, I'm just an LLM. I can't do that, when my request was perfectly within what an LLM is capable of. And then I go, you didn't do what I asked you to. And it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. And then it will do it. So, like, why is that happening? Right. But I don't know, you can't sleep on the amount of data that Google has on the entire world. If they don't make the same mistake Microsoft did and make, AI for Word and AI for Excel and AI for, but instead does the Google Gemini multimodal cross everything, has the personalization across all of your apps that you allow it into, then it will become a lot better more quickly, because it knows you and has your map history, and you seem to be enjoying pesto a lot these days, like, whatever else. So that would be my pushback.
I think you guys are both being overly pessimistic.
What a surprise, Ruthi. This is our role.
Go, optimist, go.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're shortchanging Gemini and Copilot, and here's why. They're serving a different role at the moment than something like a ChatGPT or a Claude. And to your points, those ChatGPT and Claude are a little bit more niche. They're a bit more focused. They're doing a thing, but also the thing that I see is Microsoft and Google, they've got this suite of productivity applications. And so it would be silly if they didn't connect this technology into those productivity applications, which presumably just takes a slower amount of time. And to your point, I think it's a good one, Dave. Google's not focusing, in part because they've got a lot more potential. And so it's like, let's try a bunch of different things, because some of them might add value that only Google could add. Your comment about the data. And poor Copilot. I know it's frustrating, and creating prompts for Copilot sometimes takes many more iterations just to get it to do the thing that you're trying to do, and it is frustrating. But I think the reason for that isn't because Microsoft doesn't know what it's doing or it's particularly ill-equipped. It's because it has to solve for all the problems that companies like mine are demanding, which is, well, we got to keep our data secure. We got to have these enterprise legal and IT security restrictions. It's solving for a bunch of those. Not to mention, each company can place a layer of additional restrictions on top of it. But they are releasing things like, I can, in a couple weeks here, I'll be able to go and create a custom agent that works within Teams, that uses all the different company data and stuff. I can populate it with, here's the types of things that I wanted to focus on, talk about, and now it's incorporated into Teams. So the flexibility by built into applications is going to be much more robust than something like ChatGPT does, because ChatGPT, although they announced it yesterday, they're now starting to do integrations, has to build all those integrations from scratch because it doesn't have this series of applications. So that's kind of where my thought is. These tools are all doing really fantastic and cool things. It's just they're optimizing for a different set of features and benefits based on where they're sitting in the market. So I don't know. Let's cut Copilot a little bit of slack for those of us who have to use it. It's still pretty cool.
Better than Clay.
The potential is there. Do I have any faith based on historical data on Microsoft being able to execute a great idea? No, I don't.
Have you used Loop?
Yes.
It's amazing.
It is. It's cool. If I had time to set them up for everything that I have to do, but I don't. So
also, Google kills products about like every week, it seems. So the lifespan of a Google cool thing is also not long.
Right.
I think
They
the
really
data
have
they've got is
proprietary.
like solving for enterprise is a level of complexity that's just much greater than the sort of off the shelf, direct to the consumer. It's just more difficult, and we've laid out all the reasons why it's more difficult, because you've got all these data considerations. How much context? Is it a closed loop? Have we considered this? Have we, like, what are the HR implications? I mean, here's another one just to toss in for fun. Sorry, I'll back up. In order to bring in an AI tool, some companies have policies that say we've got to test to make sure that the text generated by the AI isn't out of compliance with our HR policies around how humans treat other humans. Right? They have to be right. They have to be compliant. I'm forgetting all of the words, the HR buzzwords. I'm sure you guys can fill it here in a minute, but they have to make sure that the AI tools are compliant within HR policies that they set for humans. And so that's where we go, okay, like enterprise does come with a different set of considerations. And that's, I think, one of the things that we're good at is saying, hey, this is how you operate within an enterprise, and this is how you've got to think differently.
Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Outlook should be the same piece of software. Debate.
They just made an update so that when you try to open an event within Teams, it's more of the calendar view. I don't know if it's exactly the same or if they're just mimicking it, but agreed.
In fact, the calendaring kills me, and the one that has more options. And then if you open a one that has more options, Outlook, it'll open up Teams to be able to display the Teams meeting that's been added to the Outlook meeting. This is ridiculous to me. They're the same at this point.
But it's easier to ignore people on a different one.
I want two different levels of unread. You're unread here, and you're unread there.
Yeah, no. The most useful feature that they did across both platforms was the automatic replies finally working on both, so that you weren't out of office on Outlook, but still available in Teams, which was horrible, because then you get all the onesie twosie chats like, hey, got a minute? No, I'm 1,000 miles away. Okay, cool. 15 minutes. Wait, how did we go from 1 minute to 15? I said no. Like, yeah. So this is interesting. And Ruthi, to your point, the complexity of enterprise is a lot more, which is why I've always been fascinated, like, as sort of third-party companies started adopting AI and adding them into the tool set, watching the difference between HubSpot and Salesforce, since their markets are very targeted to either enterprise or small and medium businesses. I do feel like HubSpot is a little more nimble, but through that also creates way more variability. So yeah, there's definitely something to keep your eye on as this develops. And I think we finally got there. We finally found the passion and the stupid things to comment on, which is fantastic. So thank you for listening, everybody. We appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Also, another shout out for the Pathways email newsletter. Subscriptions will be link to subscribe there will be in the description. You will get sort of summaries and hot takes on each episode as they come out every other week, as well as a deeper dive into a particular topic that is either relevant in the news or a deeper dive in a topic from an episode that we had, or like Ruthi's always bringing up really good frameworks. There's explorations of those frameworks in those newsletters. So a lot of value there to get. So go subscribe. Thank you. And we'll see you in the next episode of 1,000 Miles. Thanks.
Cheers.